I'd like to welcome Sarah McMath, who's the Chief Executive of MOSL. Sarah, welcome to our thought leadership video, Talking on Water.
Good morning.
So, Sarah, before I begin, I know we're in a strange climate at the moment in the midst of a pandemic, so we don't have our normal sort of footage, but we're doing this video via Zoom. So thank you very much for allowing us into your lovely home, and I'm delighted to see that we share the same sort of taste in curtains. So, so welcome, and also glasses, so that's a good sign. So I'm going to kick off with my first question then, Sarah. So we were talking recently about the fact that many people don't really know and understand the retail market, and they don't really understand what MOSL does. So could you start by giving us an introduction to both?
Yes, certainly, Lila. And thank you for asking me to do this interview with you today. So the retail market opened up for business customers in April 2017. And what that means is that 1.2 million customers who run businesses have the choice of the retailer. So the water and sewerage services that are provided to them are still provided by the incumbent water company. We call them wholesalers in the water non-household market. But the customers can choose the person who provides their retail services. And really, those services are threefold. There's the calculating their bills and ensuring they get an accurate and timely bill and taking the meter read to calculate that bill. Secondly, contacting the wholesaler if the customer has a service disruption. And thirdly, providing additional services such as water efficiency. So there are 1.2 million customers in this market. Of those, about 1 million use less than 1,000 litres a day. So are broadly using water for domestic purposes, but in a business setting, so hairdressers, shops, but using about the same amount of water as a domestic customer. But 200,000 of those customers, those larger consumption users, are using significantly more. And are either using that also for domestic purposes, just more of it, so large office buildings, schools, hospitals. But at the top end of the market in terms of consumption, we've got breweries, paper mills, factories who are clearly using the water for other purposes. And for many of them, the water effectively being their product. So, for example, a brewer, water is the very essence of the product that they're producing. So that's sort of the non-household market in a nutshell.
And then MOSL's role within that?
So our role is to do a number of things. So firstly, we have a role of ensuring that retailers that we call retailers and wholesalers in the market, trading parties, that all trading parties can enter the market and have the right processes and training in place to be an effective retailer. So we manage that entry process through something called a market assurance framework. We also manage companies where they exit. So you may have seen in the news that a retailer, Tor Water, exited the market earlier this year. So we will manage the process of ensuring that the customer's data gets transferred to a new retailer. So we have a role of entry and exit. We also have a role of effectively looking after the codes. So the market is run on a whole load of rules. We call them the market codes. And our job is to ensure those codes are kept up to date. And we run a panel, a code change panel, whereby any trading party, Ofwat, or indeed MOSL ourselves can propose a code change. And we manage the process that takes that code change through. We also have an accountability for monitoring the performance of trading parties. So we have a number of performance standards and we report against those. And if those are breached, then, and this is important actually for the current situation, if those performance standards are breached, then we fine companies and we keep those performance standards. We keep those performance standards fresh and have effectively a performance framework. And then probably our single largest task is to ensure that the bills are settled. So we run a centralised system that takes the meter read data that's provided by the retailers, takes the tariff information provided by the wholesalers and effectively works out how much a customer has to pay. And to give you a sense of scale, on a monthly basis, the bills that are settled within that system amount to about £210 million on a monthly basis. So we effectively manage that process.
Thank you. And then you mentioned earlier about the code changes and also the performance standards. So my question is, obviously we're in the midst of a pandemic, COVID-19, so you must be changing things quite rapidly and also having to adjust some of these performance measures.
Yes, so it's probably worth sort of just explaining what the impact of the current crisis is to the business customers. So effectively, the biggest challenge that we had at the outset of this crisis, and actually slightly earlier in the run-up to it, is all of the bills that we calculate are based on meter reads, or the majority of them are based on meter reads. And effectively what's happening at the moment is meters are not being read. And they're not being read for a variety of reasons, but the two main ones being either the business is just shut. So you'd have seen, all restaurants, shops, hairdressers, there is no meter, there is nobody there to allow access for a meter to be read. And then there are also companies, some of the larger ones that are still in production, but are not allowing meter readers in for hygiene reasons because of social distancing. And then the third category will be where meter readers, so people who are out, their job is to read meters, have been taken off that task to carry out a more essential task. So the water industry, as you'll be aware, Lila, is obviously as affected as any other industry at the moment. They're key workers, and it's really important that if water companies don't have sufficient people to carry out their core duties, that those meter readers in many cases can be used to carry out some of those activities. And the challenge is, if a meter isn't read, then my central system, CMOS, which is the settlement engine, will calculate a bill based on historical consumption. Well, in the case of the first category, the businesses have actually shut down, there is no consumption. So the challenge we were facing right at the outset is effectively bills would be generated and assumptions would be made, bills would be generated for customers that would never be paid because the consumption hadn't happened. There's a second category where actually consumption is continuing, but potentially the customer is going to be facing financial challenges and may not prioritise their water bill. So the water's being used, but effectively you're just building up a bad debt, an issue. And then the third category where the water carries on being consumed, but we can't get the data. So basically that was the challenge that we were facing. So the immediate action that we took, working very much in collaboration with both Ofwat and with trading parties, and I mentioned earlier our code panel, so a group of people who on a normal basis would meet on a monthly basis to assess any code changes. One of the challenges with the market is things tend to move quite slowly on code changes, with an average of months to make a change. And since the beginning of this crisis, we have been making code changes on average in 72 hours. So again, really shown that in a crisis, this sector can come together and make some rapid changes. So those changes have really focused in the first instance on recognising that retailers are going to have an immediate financial challenge because the money that they need to get in from customers is going to slow down. One important point about the money in this market is retailers effectively pay the wholesaler for the water the customer has used before the customer pays them. So that debt, any bad debt risk within the market on a normal basis sits very firmly with retailers. And so you can see that debt building up or that cash flow reducing, but those retailers still needing to pay the wholesalers. So the first category of changes we made were really to minimise the amount that trading parties have to pay me as a market operator. I charge for breaches in performance standards, and normally we would keep that for a period of time and then we redistribute it. What we have said in a code change is effectively companies, retailers can offset what they pay me against basically the money I already keep on their behalf. So effectively, it's quite a small amount of money compared to the millions and millions of pounds in terms of settlement, but it gives an immediate relief on payment charges. We've also then looked at changes that we can make to, for example, understand where those properties are becoming vacant. So where restaurants have shut down either temporarily or long term. We've made a code change which enables retailers to effectively tell the system that that customer is not using any water for a period of time. It's called a temporary vacancy flag. But that's enabling retailers to be able to effectively stop that process of auto calculation, which is effectively looking to bill for water that isn't being used. So those were the first sort of immediate changes. There's work that has started and is ongoing to look at the ability for payments to be deferred, or a proportion of payments to be deferred for wholesalers. That's a bit more complicated, and it's important when we look at this to recognise that not all customers are the same. So absolutely, those million customers, those smaller users who use 1,000 litres a day or less, we know that those companies are shutting down. But they only use less than 10% of the water in the market. So business customers overall use about 33% of all the water consumed in England. But those smaller customers, who we know are being affected by the current crisis, only use about less than 10% of that. And at the upper end of the market, paper mills, we're all appear to be using a lot more, or certainly buying a lot more loo roll. Food producers, soft drink producers, those businesses are actually using more water at the moment, and therefore you would expect them to continue to be able to pay. So it's really important that we recognise, as we put these code changes in and we seek to address the immediate and the longer term issues, that we recognise that customers are different in their experiences. And then just sort of finally on that point, the main focus at the moment, and this work is very much led by Ofwat, is around understanding that bad debt and liquidity in the market. We've put some immediate changes in, but those will have to be unwound in the longer term. And Ofwat are due to go out to consultation on some options to consult with trading parties about what is the best way to do that gives some immediate relief to retailers. Wholesalers have already stepped in with some support to share that risk, but really how we have an enduring solution that ideally leads us out of this crisis with a market that's stronger than we went into the crisis with.
And I think you've touched on a strong point there, Sarah. I think the issue at this time is there's a real need to collaborate and to, the word that you often hear at the 5 o'clock briefing is around pace. We really do have to move quite quickly and quite rapidly within this current pandemic. And I know that collaboration is one of those real sort of words that you are passionate about, but not just a sort of word, but you actually do stuff around in the sector to actually enhance collaboration. So I just want to sort of get an understanding and a sort of more of a feel in terms of what you're doing in terms of water efficiency and building that collaboration in the sector.
Yes, Lila, as you said, I feel very passionately that this is a market where there is a real opportunity to collaborate to provide a better service to business customers. So focusing in on what we look to achieve from this market, it was about providing choice for business customers, about giving them the option of choosing their retailer. But we also had an aim that customers would therefore be able to control their water usage and ideally reduce it. So in terms of the current crisis, what we have really seen is a sector who, to be honest, has been criticised in the past for a level of distrust or not working together, genuinely working together with trading parties from wholesalers, from retailers, with Water UK on behalf of wholesalers, the UK Water Retailer Council on behalf of retailers, CC Water, Ofwat, DEFRA, all coming together in a high-level group where we are looking to say, well, what's the best thing for the business customers and for the market to ensure that retailers can continue to operate during this difficult period. And I said, ideally, come out of this with a stronger market than we went into it. So we have seen that collaboration. We've seen really strong team working on our code panel. And I've personally been very impressed with the way in which people have come to the party looking at the market and the customers. So sort of thinking back to, we were planning this conversation before the crisis, and one of the things that we were going to be talking about is water efficiency. And I think in the current crisis, that is something that actually the work that we've been doing for the last 6 months or so on really trying to understand consumption data, whilst we started doing that from a water efficiency perspective, working with colleagues from WaterWise and in discussions with DEFRA and others, we started that work to try and understand why is it that water efficiency take-up is not high in the market? And it's been very low. You'd have seen Ofwat's State of the Market report last year. Very few customers in the business market have taken up water efficiency offerings to as part of their reason for switching. So I'll come back to that in a minute in terms of what that's shown us. But what that has given us is that evidence base going into the crisis around who uses what water in England, so that a real understanding that whilst there are 1 million business customers who are going to be really affected by the current crisis, their consumption is at the lower end. So if I look back at water efficiency, what we do have now, 3 years into the market, is a centralised data set that shows 1.2 million customers using water, where they're using it, when they're using it. And we've got that data that shows us where the consumption is happening across England. And what is really interesting is when you start to break that down, some of the messaging on water efficiency for business customers, particularly those lower volume users, is actually the same as for domestic customers. They use the water for domestic purposes, they're just using it in a business context. When you look at the other end of the market, so the very large users, what it's clear is that for them, water efficiency is part of a broader CSR agenda. So talking to some of the large companies, particularly food production companies, their interest in water efficiency and water reduction is actually linked to the embedded carbon in water. So we were starting to have some really interesting conversations across the sector that says actually the usage of water and the ability to influence that usage, we really need to be focusing on those 200,000 customers who use 90% of the water. To give that some context, that's nearly 30% of all the water used in England by anybody. So that's a small group of customers using a high proportion of the water. As I said, that work has just started and is informing the current situation, and really keen for that to continue post this crisis.
It seems that almost promoting water efficiency is at odds with the retail market, because the less water that's consumed, the less water that can be billed. So I'm just, and also there are conversations around, these thinly capitalized retailers, especially the new independent ones. So this sort of brings my conversation around, some people sort of think, is this market sustainable? Especially in COVID-19?
I think that's a really good question, Lila, and clearly we have gone into this crisis with a market, if you look at Ofwat's State of the Market report from last year, relatively low value to customers in terms of actual bill reductions, a number of retailers who are not currently making a profit 3 years into market opening, and as we've already mentioned, relatively low uptake of water efficiency offerings. So one of the reasons why we've been looking at this broader question of value is to really identify where is the value in this market. There are retailers who are successful in the market. There are a number of different models that are coming in. I think there is a level of innovation starting. I'm not sure it's moved at the pace we would have liked in the first 3 years, but I think there is a real opportunity, actually, as a result of this crisis, to really focus on where is the value in this market, where can retailers bring a real value add to a customer. And I've said on a number of occasions, it did feel like a couple of years in, we'd started to lose sight of why we did this. So the whole purpose of opening this market was to give a better overall service to business customers. So providing that choice has to have some benefit, and that benefit could be a lower bill, it could be a better level of service, probably ideally both. And as you've rightly pointed out, that hasn't happened across the board, but it has happened in some sectors. And going back to the point of collaboration, I think there is a real opportunity with the ways of working we've witnessed over the last few weeks for us to put our heads together jointly and say, okay, well, what is working? And really take the opportunity 3 years in to say, really openly and honestly, is everything working as it should? And where it isn't, having the confidence to change it. So to give you a specific example, one of the areas of the market which we could see has been successful is self-supply, where effectively some large customers effectively become a retailer. So they get their own retail license and they act on their own behalf. We didn't even think of that prior to market opening. And so it's a real opportunity 3 years in to say, okay, well, what's working? Why is it working? What isn't working? And what can we do to change that? And what I've seen over the last few weeks is a willingness to have that very open conversation and a real desire to make it work.
Great, that's good. And that also then brings me on to the business plan, the 2020-21 business plan that was recently launched. So obviously I've read that from cover to cover, and I thought it was a great business plan, but also in light of COVID-19 and the challenges for the sector, one of my questions is, do you think anything needs to change within that in terms of the priorities for MOSL at the moment?
Yeah, so we put our business plan together for 2020-2021, really with a focus on making the market easier to do business in. So one of the things that we would observe is for the value in the market, it's quite complex. So one of the things that we've had feedback from, particularly from those new entrant retailers to the market, is it's actually quite hard work. It's quite complex. So the way in which bills are settled is quite complicated. There are quite a lot of there's a lot of codes and there's a lot of rules that you have to know to be in the market. And there's also a very high level of indirect costs. So as you'll be aware, the market was opened at pace. There was a very real deadline of the 1st of April 2017. As a result of that, there are some parts of the market which were effectively taken from a different market, predominantly Scotland, and moved into the English market. So one example of that is the bilateral transactions, which is basically when a wholesaler and a retailer need to solve a customer's problem. So a customer's got a broken meter. There's a process whereby a retailer needs to talk to a water company because the wholesaler owns the meter, but the retailer reads the meter. That process was taken out of the central system because, to be honest, we simply ran out of time in the run out to market opening to get into the system. So that is largely paper-based or form-based, and every single wholesaler does that differently. So in Scotland, that sort of works. There's one wholesaler, multiple retailers, but where you've got multiple wholesalers all looking at doing that in a slightly different way, you can see for a new retailer, that is really complicated because you have to effectively interact with 15 different companies using a different form, a different process. So that focus on simplification, on reducing those indirect costs, which is basically, the indirect cost is basically just people having to process forms. Basically, is taking that out is still absolutely essential. So that core of our business plan to ensure that we reduce complexity, we reduce indirect costs, and we focus on ensuring that the customer is getting the service. So the ideal is if a customer's got a broken meter, the outcome should be that their meter is fixed as soon as possible, and that focus is still the same. Having said that, what the current crisis has shown us is that the assessment of the trading parties, us and Ofwat, that the important thing to get right is an accurate, timely meter read, has only become more important. So that focus on understanding who reads the meters, when they're read, who owns them, that whole question over metering, which is in our business plan as something which is really quite a new piece of work, for me is a piece of work that needs to move faster and quicker now. And one of the code changes that we can put through in the next week looks to start an immediate change to allow wholesalers who've got meter read data to put that into the system. Really with a whole focus on data. The thing about this market is the real value in this market is in the data that we gather in the centralised system. And having rules which constrain that data and constrain the quality of that data is really the thing that we are seeking to challenge through that business plan.
I think that's really an interesting point, because I recently learned, because I didn't know this, that MOSL had an innovation fund, or has an innovation fund, which I understand is currently suspended in light of COVID-19. But in terms of the innovations, especially in light of our supply community, so as you know, British Water has 200 members and reaches out to a number of different companies providing all kinds of products and technologies and solutions for the water and wastewater industry. Lots of companies have loads of innovations and expertise in metering. So just trying to sort of understand how can the supply chain and supply community get involved in the innovation fund once it becomes active again, especially in light of metering challenges we have.
Okay. Yes, Lila, we had a recent code change introduced earlier this year that means that the performance charges I mentioned earlier, instead of being redistributed back into trading parties, which is what's happened historically, there is an option to effectively retain those charges centrally in a central pot, effectively a market improvement or innovation fund, which then trading parties can bid for that money to look at innovative solutions to improve the market. Just to your point, suppliers, other people can also bid for that money, but they have to be aligned with a trading party. So they have to have the support of a trading party to say, yeah, we think that's something that is worth exploring. We were just in the process of developing the governance of that. I'm very keen personally that we don't get to a bureaucratic process that means I've got a pot of £100 and I spend 50 of those pounds working out where to spend the other 50. So we've been really focused on developing a robust governance process that makes sure we allocate the funds appropriately, but one that does not use too much of the money on the governance and the approval process. So we were very much in the middle of that. The current crisis has meant that we have suspended that work because we felt that in the current crisis, having that money available for retailers to effectively offset against their fees was a more pragmatic, immediate approach. We will continue with this work once we're through the current crisis. And this is a real opportunity to effectively have new thoughts come in. So I'm really keen that we have new voices come into this market in the context of, there are some areas of the market which have not developed as well as we would have liked. There are people out there who have really interesting solutions. A number of them contact me directly. I get a lot of LinkedIn posts, emails directs or contacts to say, look, we've got this really interesting idea. I think it is really important that it's sponsored by trading parties, but that they are innovative ideas which will benefit ultimately the end customer. And some of that innovation will be to challenge the status quo and to really reveal those constraints that the codes put in. And as the market operator, we can then work with Ofwat to really understand what parts of the codes are either driving unintended consequences and behaviours or potentially stifling innovation. So I think the innovation approach has two potential outcomes. I think it brings new ideas in and potentially brings new thoughts into the market, but it also really helps us as a market operator to understand why innovation hasn't happened and where that is a code constraint for us to be able to explore how we can change those.
And the fund is £3 million, I believe.
Well, it will be based on previous. It will effectively be based on performance charges. So it will be, if we look at history, anywhere between 1.5 and 3 million, depending on performance charges.
And then once you've got the framework up and running, it will be on your website, or do people have to go to retailers to understand how it works? What will be the way that supply chain companies can get involved?
No, it will be through MOSL. So we will run that fund centrally. We will have some involvement of our code panel in terms of where that money gets allocated, but the administration of that will be through MOSL, and the communications will be via our website, which, as you'll have seen, having read our business plan, is a major focus for us over the next 12 months, is ensuring that we are communicating with trading parties in a way that is simple, clear and concise. We recognise our website is not the most easy to navigate at the moment, and something like this needs to be sort of front and centre, that people can see it, click on it and very quickly get through to how do I bid for this money.
So, obviously, it's putting people at the sort of centre and heart of what we're talking about. Clearly, you're trying to make sure that the trading parties can work effectively together to move through this pandemic. You're changing codes rapidly within 72 hours when it could have taken maybe 6 months or so. So you are responding really rapidly to the current crisis and trying to ensure that the retail market is robust and remains robust for the future, which is absolutely great. And I suppose this now leads me on to the people aspect. So you've got a team of 55 people. I know that you are, again, very passionate about mental health and well-being. So I suppose everybody at the moment, as we are having to work from home, so I just want to hear your thoughts in terms of how you've adjusted.
Yes, certainly, Lila. It was interesting on the day that we got news that everyone had to work from home. We were just made the decision to test our business continuity and working from home. So in the run-up to the shutdown of our office, we had actually already been testing our business continuity, and we knew that all our systems could be operated from home. So we'd done that in advance. But when the news came, it was quite sudden, and we had brought our whole team into a room at 3 o'clock on that Monday, the 17th of March, and said, we're going to go to a test where half of you will work from home this week, half next week. At 5 o'clock, we had to then revise that and effectively tell everybody that they were not coming back into the office the following morning, apart from to pick up IT. So we really recognised that speed, whilst it had sort of been on the horizon for a while, that the reality of, okay, this isn't a test anymore, you are now all working from home, was quite sudden. So what we have been focused on is primarily making sure that people can work safely at home. So ensuring, our first focus was on ensuring they had the right equipment. So we've been making sure that people have the right IT equipment, the right environment to work in. Then making sure that people were comfortable using things like Zoom and Teams and all the others. So we've been issuing guidance, not just on how to use them from a practical perspective, but some hints and tips on the best way to engage with these media. But really important has been understanding the people and the individuals in our teams, and therefore the different challenges that they will have. So about a quarter of my team have got school-age children. So clearly the decision to close the schools that Friday then impacted disproportionately on a quarter of the team. We have individuals who are living in shared accommodation, and for whom actually having a private area to work is much more challenging. So for me, it's all been about really understanding that whilst we're a team of 55, those are 55 individuals who all have different challenges. We did a survey last week where we asked people how they were adjusting to the work, also how they were feeling about that, and what we could be doing more of, and we're going to be sharing that this afternoon. We're continuing, in fact, we've increased our all-team meetings, so we're getting the whole team together online and having those face-to-face via video link conversations on a regular basis. But we've also introduced lots of support for mental health and wellbeing. So we have a virtual kitchen where people can join certain points a day, have a cup of tea with a colleague. We've got 4 mental health first aiders who we've trained over the last few months, who are available at set periods of time where people, if they're just feeling a bit low or they just want to have a chat with somebody, they can contact one of those individuals on a confidential basis. We've got our newsletter, Remotely Interesting, which is going out with hints and tips on sort of things to do with your family, things to do to occupy your mind. And just sharing very personal experiences of how people are feeling about the current situation. I suppose to sum it all up, what we're really doing is, as I said, thinking about our team as a team of 55 individual people who have all got interesting and individual challenges, but have some shared experiences. And just to share one sort of high-level outcome from the survey that we did last week, what has been really interesting is about half and half split. Half of our team actually feel less stressed now they're working from home. That could be because they have a long commute. It could be because they live away from home during the week and they're spending more time with their family. And half of our team feel more stressed about working from home. So it's really important to recognise that for some people, this is a positive experience, spending more time at home, and for some it is really, really challenging. We're also making sure that we're touching on the personal side as well, and regularly introducing family members as they wander past in the background.
And I think, that's one of the interesting things, isn't it, is that I think all of us are getting to know our colleagues much better.
Yes, and they're choosing curtains.
Exactly. Or books or whatever that might be. I think, absolutely, you're right. We're all getting to know our colleagues much more intimately than we probably did working side by side for months, years even. So, and I think you're quite right. I think this is a climate in which we need to be much more open about how we've adjusted to the current situation, how we can work effectively together and how we can support each other so that each other can then deliver what they need to deliver on a daily basis, maybe more flexible working hours and things like that, to ensure that people who do have children maybe can work later in the evening if that's what they choose to do or feel that it would work better for them. So, I think we are in quite interesting times, but I think that there are things that we can probably carry forward into the future once we then get back to hopefully some kind of normalised, if you like, way of working.
So we're working collaboratively with our teams, and so, for example, those with young children and in many cases another partner that works, complete flexibility over the hours people want to work. So really making sure that people are confident to talk up about that and to say, actually, what works for me is working from 6 a.m. till midday or 1 o'clock, so that then my friend start his work or her work. And the really key here is for us to keep talking to people and to allow people the confidence to have those conversations with their line manager and know that those will be dealt with sympathetically.
Thank you very much, Sarah. So this wraps up our thought leadership interview, Talking of Water. Thank you so much. And also, I want to thank you for taking part in our weekly Better Together calls that are held on a Friday from 12 to 1. So thank you for also joining that call earlier last week. So thank you very much again, Sarah. No doubt we'll be in touch soon. And hopefully you and your family will continue to stay safe. I'm sure you will. And thanks again.
Thank you.